she is finalizing now. The reason she had to do this, it wasn't just an arbitrary thing. It was because of the fact that they have a tremendous amount of analysis that they have to do to make sure that all the information shown on these maps is correct. And she can't continually take in new information and make the deadlines that she's under the gun to do. So she said, but, and this is Kathy Schaefer, and she's been a wonderful person to work with. Kathy's just a great person, in my opinion. Been very helpful to us. But she said, if you will go ahead, and she was telling this to the city officials and their engineer, go ahead and make your case and get it submitted. We'll process it, and the map will go into effect on the existing map now that doesn't have the 200 in it. I mean, that includes the 200 in the floodplain. Will go into effect January 10th. If your appeal is something that we recognize and that we will support, then come January 11th, we can do a letter of map change, or what's called a LOMAR, and get that corrected. So you'd only be a very short time between the adoption of the map that she's processing as the basis of this letter of final determination that's going through in July. Or it'll only be a short time after January that this thing would before the problem with the 200 lots or whatever it ends up being would be fixed.
If there's any questions, please line up the microphone so that the
Okay.
viewing audience can hear it.
Okay, yes, sir.
I was here for the 69 flood, yes?
Yes, sir.
And you're saying that it didn't breach the levee? It washed out the dump.
Yeah, no, I didn't say it didn't breach the levee.
Well, I mean, this is above the turn, and it kind of makes common sense, is that where the gap is where the turn is.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's obvious that water went out through that gap, or the place where there is no levee. It does not show that on FEMA's map, on their 1985 map. They do not show that area being subject to a 1% flood. And so that's the point I was trying to make. Not that there wasn't flooding, because there was obviously flooding in the wagon wheel area, which is outside the boundaries of the river.
That's below the wagon wheel area.
Mm-hmm.
But the other question I have is that the FEMA flood map keeps changing by taking certain houses out. Are they making physical changes? Or are they just manipulating the map to where it don't include too many houses?
No. It has nothing to do with a given situation on houses. It has everything to do with the elevation of that house relative to the floodplain, relative to the 1% flood elevation. And there are ways, if people feel that they are not, and this is a huge undertaking, and they're doing this nationwide. And if people feel like that in an area here, in this area down along Vineyard, in that area, there's places where houses are higher, houses are lower. Some people may say, look, I don't think I'm in the floodplain. There is a process where they can get that determination made. It requires a filing. It requires work with an engineer to certify an elevation. But if you can certify an elevation that is above the 1% or above the floodplain, or I think the elevation hike it has to be is 1 foot above. Is that it?
In accordance to the ordinance.
Accordance to the ordinance of the city. So you would want to contact your city floodplain manager. Tell them, look, I think my house is above the floodplain elevation. There's a process that you can use to make that filing and get that corrected. Okay. Sir. 2 feet above. 2 feet above is the word.
Just very quickly, last night at the City Council meeting, the council directed its staff to hold community workshops. So I think you can look to that to be happening, in which these more detailed Oxnard City floodplain management engagement questions can be answered. But that's about the best that we can do at this point.
Okay. Any other questions?
I just have a comment.
Any questions?
Any other questions? Can you over to the... While he's going over there, I just want to point out, please come up front. We have some great resources here. In fact, some of these we just got today from FEMA. This is brand new. Why we map flood risks. Good information in here. This is here and available. We have it in in English. We have some of these in Spanish. But please come up and take advantage of this information because it's there for your benefit.
Did I understand you to say that 1 foot of water or something, 2 feet above? I'm trying to determine whether my house is in danger or not.
When FEMA determines the flood hazard area, they also determine the elevation of the hazard. So if a building or a finished flood elevation of a structure is above, in this particular case, 2 feet over that elevation that was determined by FEMA, then you would not be required to, you will be outside of the flood hazard area. There will still be some requirements, but you can still, that will have an impact on your flood insurance rate. And I don't have the specific information, and that will be released later by FEMA, but that is a way to verify whether you will be required to buy flood insurance or not buy flood insurance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Sir?
In the areas where the flood would affect, how high can floodwaters get?
Well, this is determined by the severity of the flood.
Let's say if worst case scenario.
Worst case scenario would be something what we call a Noah type flood. Could be quite severe. Now the thing is, what FEMA, and that's not meant to be funny. I mean, basically, the severity of the storm controls what we're going to see in the way of runoff and floods. Now, what FEMA has done is they have determined that they will provide that one leg, that leg of the program support for the National Flood Insurance Program of insurance based upon the 1% flood. That's the 1 chance in 100 or the 1% chance that flood will occur. That implies, statistically, it implies a degree of severity of flooding and height. Now, what in here, on this photo here, this is happened in 1969, and there's the railroad bridge. And that was at that time determined to be a flood flow of about a 1% flood. Now what we're going to see is that we're going to see that elevation increase as the new data comes out for the reasons that I mentioned earlier. You'll probably see 5 or 6 feet flood elevation go on top of that for the new 1% flood elevation. So that's what this business is all about the flooding down here on the south side where SCR3 is, and why that's happening and why it didn't happen before, and it's not that it can't happen. It can happen any given year. There's a 1% flood, there's 1 in 100, and then there's a 500-year flood, 1 in 500. So you can go on up from there. So you can get very, very severe depending on how much of a time period you're going to analyze and plan for. Sir?
I had a question. Of the 21 million that I believe the California is getting from the stimulus package, 4.5 billion is supposed to be going towards infrastructure. How much of that is going towards Ventura County infrastructure of the 4.5 billion that's allotted by the stimulus package of the total 21 million? Or 21 billion, I'm sorry.
21 billion. I don't know the answer entirely to that. We do have some information. We got about, what, 7.5 million for Santa Paula Creek?
I was just wondering how much of that is going towards building infrastructure for Ventura County, like what we're doing.
It's an excellent question, but the answer really comes from a variety of different cities, counties as to what we're getting, and it's in flux. What Tom just mentioned is known for us is 7.5 million for the Santa Paula Creek. Others may come. So the message we're trying to give to you is that on this project, current stimulus, new stimulus, federal legislation, state bond money, all of these sources, we're going to have to cobble together to get to that point. And none of this happens quick, free, or easy, and we just have to figure out a way to do that.
Thank you.
And I think the message there is, in order to really impact that is, work through